There's a topic I don't think most people appreciate inside of RTSs or inside of any 1v1 competitive domain, and that's the idea that the mountain scales up as you ascend it. It's not a hill that then gradually tapers off over time. So I want to introduce this idea from the power scaling community. For those of you who don't know, power scaling is when you take characters like Bleach or Naruto, from Bleach, Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Jujutsu Kaisen, Kill la Kill, whatever you like, and they say, well, we know what this character's feats are at this point in the story. We see what their powers are. What would have happened if they had fought this other character in that same universe, or this other character outside of their universe? Are their attacks city level? Can they blow up a planet? How fast are they? This is popularized by people like Death Battle, but I actually got into this a few years before I even knew of Death Battle, courtesy of people like Swag Kage and Set the Programmer, because they did power scaling for Naruto and Bleach and Dragon Ball Z. Now, something I want to stress here is that they have this excellent term in that community called powercliffing. I think it perfectly applies to the RTS domain or any 1v1 ladder domain. It's when a series has a massive power spike or drop for more or less everyone who remains relevant, and those are the keywords, who remains relevant, that changes the entire setting's power level overnight and results in a power growth chart for the series that has a vertical cliff wall in it, either ascending or descending. Ascending, descending. Or to another quote, basically it just jumps in power levels from one to another, and there are characters that become unable to catch up or get removed from the story, right? So a very good Naruto example, right, is that when Naruto gets the ability of KCM2 or QB in Chakra Mode 2, when he's working with Kurama, he dwarfs everyone that isn't on the level of a Kage or a main antagonist or a Biju. Everyone else in this series is just meaningless. Like Ino, sorry, garbage in comparison. Now, that's enough for the anime examples. If you're not a big fan of anime, I'll skip past that. Why am I bringing this up in the context of RTS games? Well, people think that 1v1 competitions are this hill. That there's a learning curve at first, and then, once you get to like the top 10%, then going from 10% to 7% to 5% is pretty easy. It's a bit of a smooth transition. It's nothing like that. It is an absolutely, it's more like you get here to the top 10%, and then here's top 5, and then here's top 2, and then the top 1 might as well be a sheer cliff wall that you can't put any equipment on, right? Or you have to free climb it and there's no handholds. If you're part of that community, you'll know what I mean. And if you're not, then you won't. It's perfectly fine. So let me use an example for about me. Okay, so StormgateWorld, wonderful website, shows the ranked ladder distribution, separates primarily by RP or ranked points, and then secondarily by MMR. We're going to use ranked points because that was what was used to determine the qualifying seeds for number 1 through 4 for the Elite Gaming Channel 10K. So we're going to go by RP. We're just going to search my name right now. Okay, I'm going to search up Atano Circus, and we're going to see that I am number 430 currently. As a person not in the beta, I'm sure this will get worse over time, but as of the time of recording, I'm number 430 out of 84,200 in people. So I am number 4.3 out of 842, which would put me in terms of rank points alone in the top 0.5% of all players. Not bad for someone who wasn't in the beta, right? Surely I've hit the 90% or the 95% threshold, right? Surely I'm pretty close to being a really good player. No, not in the slightest. Even the top 0.5% in terms of rank points mean absolutely nothing. So let me go over why. So I'll put it this way. The difference between, I'm at 1664, 1662, somewhere like that in MMR. If we add 200 points to me, I end up being number 64 or 65. Yeah, 64 on the ladder. I would replace currently Photon Cannon's Enjoyer, and I would become number 64 in the ladder, from 403 to 64. If we add 200 from there to go to 2064, I would be number 14. Now notice that the first gap was 340 odd places, but the second gap is only about 50. If we add 200 rank points from there to go to 2264 MMR, I go from number 14, right, to number 3. Okay, if we add 200 from there, I go to number 2, and then we would have to add another 200 or another 150 from there for me to be number 1. So the difference between me and number 1 in terms of rank points alone, that difference of 800 some odd 800 some odd ranked points is massive. I'll put it the other way. Okay, so you might be wondering, like, who cares about that? Like, Well, anyone could do that. What's the big deal like that? So I'm going to be scrolling through the Elite. I'm going to be storming down through the StormgateWorld channel, right? And keep in mind, I'm number about 403 with 1664. So let's find out, right? Where's 1464? Where is that? Well, if you were to look for 1464, you would be looking at something like the number 1430th player in the world. So 200 rank points gets you from 1430 to 400, from 400 to 64, from 64 to 14, 14 to 3, 3 to 2, and then 2 to 1. Right? This is powercliffing. This completely betrays the idea. And that's at the 0.5% uppermost level of all RP gainers in the entire game. Now you might say, oh, but that's not relevant. Let's talk about MMR. Okay, let's absolutely talk about MMR. So I've never hit 1700 MMR. Okay, I'm currently, my peak is 1681. If I had hit 1700 MMR, I would have been about the 1340th best player inside of Stormgate. That's 134 out of 8420, right? So that would still leave me at something crazy like the top 15% or something like that. 84, 20, 134. It's even better than that, actually. It's more like the top 1.5%. So even if we look at MMR, I am within the top 2% bracket cutoff that used to be used for StarCraft 2 Masters levels player. And I say this as a person who has only gotten Masters 3 one time, not in a very profound or complete manner, right? A very all-in-ish style. And as a person who was never had aspirations for making Grandmaster, was never close to playing Grandmasters, was never in that top 200 rank like this. Now, I understand why people want to think that they can get to the top 90% of the hill or 95% of the hill, and from there they just coast and everything is an improvement. It's not. It's actually extremely difficult to improve once you get up there. And as I've just demonstrated, it's extremely difficult. Like going from number 1400 to number 400 is actually easier in terms of RP than getting from number 3 to number 1. The gap is that big. So let me explain something else here so you understand the idea of power clipping, right? So let's say my MMR was at its peak MMR of 1681. It's not. Let's say it was at its peak MMR. Okay, the difference between me and the number 1 player in the world is about 900 MMR. To put that in perspective, you could probably teach a person who has never played an RTS game to hit 700 MMR, right? You could probably do that, right? If you're watching this and you think that I'm not that good or like, oh, I'm only slightly better than you or I'm way worse than you, you could convince somebody in your life who doesn't play RTS games to hit 700 MMR on Stormgate. I mean, not now, courtesy of the fact that we're out of Steam Next Fest, but the gap between that person and me is the same gap as between me and Veni Vidi Vici. And it's actually a bigger, and that's just the numbers, it's actually an even bigger gap, as we have seen from the games that Veni Vidi Vici has played before he so graciously gave his position over to Parting, because he's just such a swell guy. He pulled one last magic trick for everybody else. Now, a lot of people don't want to think about this fact because they don't want to see how far the mountain goes, because the mountain is big and it's scary and it's treacherous and there's clouds up there and how many people are up there and is it even safe to climb? I have no idea. You might be banging your head against a wall. You'll probably hit your physical limit at some point, right, or your mental limit, and the amount of time that you have to put in to eke out that last little bit of practice to improve is so extremely difficult. But you should actually take this as a positive sign, that there is so much more that you could be doing in your games. It's actually easier to improve the further down at the base of the mountain you are. So if you understand the scale of the mountain, and you understand that it's not just a rounded hill, you can improve tremendously.